If a man came into your life, wouldn't you want to compromise?
Stupid.
Chapter 1937 of Sula is one of the most satisfying chapters of the entire book. Let's get into it. In order to properly break down chapter 1937, I first want to do a quick recap of chapter 1927. Chapter 1927 tells the story of Nell Wright, Sula's best friend from childhood and the closest thing she has to a sister, getting married to the one and only Jude Green. Jude Green is the man in town who all the women fawn after. Known for his looks and his singing voice, Jude has the pick of the women in town to choose from, and he chooses Miss Nell Wright to settle down with.
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
One of the first themes this chapter explores is masculinity, and more specifically, toxic masculinity, which will be explored in both chapters. Jude displays toxic masculinity in two ways, the first of which is his need for a job that makes him feel macho, gets him dirty, and puts him alongside the white folk, giving him a proximity to power that he'll most likely never attain. There's nothing wrong with not being satisfied in where you are in life or wanting to climb to higher positions and be more content with your everyday life and what you do to make a living. But to me, it's hysterical to hear him fantasizing about one day being able to brag about how he was injured on the job. Morrison brings up this idea of a war of fake prosperity, which I think is notable because it ties into conversations of the state of the black community today and what it means to be doing well. Ultimately, after constant denial, Jude realizes he would never be chosen to build the road alongside the white folk, which the book insinuates is solely because of his race. And he decides to confirm his masculinity by getting married and starting a family, which leads to point number 2. Jude got married not out of love, but to prove his masculinity. Toni Morrison writes, "So it was rage. Rage and a determination to take on a man's role anyhow that made him press Nell about settling down. He wanted someone to care about his hurt, deep enough to hold him, deep enough to rock him. And if he were to be a man, that someone could no longer be his mother." Is this not the most toxic thing we've seen in the book so far? Getting married to heal a wound of not being man enough is so sad, yet it's something we see both then and now. Inevitably, in the next chapter, we see Jude coming to the realization that no external position or title can make you a man. Let that sink in. No external position or title can make you a man. While I wish that he would use this knowledge to change for the better, he instead ends up seeking validation in a different form to hopefully make him whole again. So in this next chapter, 10 years have passed between the moment Nell got married and now. And I want to give you some background info. A being, Sula rightfully supported Nell through the whole wedding as her biggest fan. Rightfully so. Snap, snap, snap. Nell proceeded to then settle down and have 3 children and make somewhat peace with her life. And lastly, Sula went off to college and left the town of Medallion and hadn't seen or spoken to Nell since the day of the wedding. Two important words which I relate to this chapter are suffering and survival. Morrison starts the chapter off with some powerful words, writing, "They did not believe death was accidental. Life was, but death was deliberate. Nature was never askew, only inconvenient. Plague and drought were as natural as springtime. The purpose of evil was to survive it. And they had determined without ever knowing they made up their minds to do it, to survive floods, white people, tuberculosis, famine, and ignorance." This is really meaningful to me because I think about all the struggle I've overcome in my own life and how somehow I made it through. There were plenty of things in which I recognized as extremely difficult to make it through, and I had to make up my mind that, I couldn't give up. But there were other hurdles which were immense in their own right, but I never reflected on as having made up my mind to move forward. From high school to college to navigating this real world as a young adult, there are plenty of moments which I passively made the decision to keep fighting. Sula returns to Medallion after 10 years, and while being coveted and stared at by every man in town, the first person she returns to see is her grandmother Eva. Her and Eva immediately get into an argument where Eva criticizes her for never marrying, and Sula responds by saying she doesn't want to make anyone but herself.
Can anyone live with Eartha Kitt?
That's not for me to decide. That's for someone who decides to live with me to decide. Not for me.
But are you willing to compromise within a relationship?
To compromise? What is compromising? Compromising for what? Compromising for what reason? To compromise? For what? To compromise. What is compromise?
Isn't love a union between two people? Or does Eartha fall in love with herself?
I think if you were to think about it in terms of analyzing, yes, I fall in love with myself and I want someone to share it with me. I want someone to share me with me.
Later on in the chapter, Eva brings up God needing to strike Sula down, and Sula responds by asking if it's the same God that watched her burn Plum. In the later part, Sula states how Eva sold her life for the insurance policy of $23, and Eva responds by stating, "You throw yours away," to which Sula finally remarks, "It's mine to throw," with Eva ending on, "One day you'll need it." I don't really know how it's gonna come to play or what this means, but I think Toni Morrison, I think she directed and wrote pretty much a great script. Like if this was a play, I would want to write it. If this was a play, I would want to watch it because the drama, the realness, you know, the recall, because like I said in the previous video, I never knew how the whole Plum situation was gonna come back. I never knew what Hannah burning was gonna come back to. I never knew why it happened, and I guess we still don't know why it happened, but I think it's really important that somebody recognizes that this woman is not normal, and Eva, and maybe neither is Sula, but we have to acknowledge that everything going on like has to be addressed in a formal way, and I just appreciated this scene. So back to it. This whole exchange is really important because I think it underlines the self-perceived maturity in Sula and how she's made the decision that her life is hers and hers only. Sula doesn't find herself believing in a higher power, nor bending to the societal norms of respecting elders, nor the fear of wasting her own life. She's complacent with any and all decisions that she makes, as long as they're hers to make, and I feel as though that's the idea of power being embodied. That's her sort of maturing, for better or for worse. The argument ends with Sula threatening to one day light Eva on fire the same way that Eva did Plum, and shortly thereafter Sula ends up putting Eva in an elderly home and stealing the house. Next we follow Nell sensing the aura of Sula back in town. The love for her husband that she lost is coming back again. The misery of having to police her kids is turning into happiness and thankfulness just to be there, and about nothing can kill her mood. We then see Sula visiting Nell's house and them joking like good old times, and Nell regaining the love for life that she lost when Sula was gone. I love that. It's beautiful. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
In the conversation, we see Sula deflecting questions regarding getting rid of Eva, kicking people out, ghosting Nell. She's pretty much deflecting all the important questions, and they're just laughing and catching up. I'm not sure how we got here, but Nell comes to a certain realization that Sula isn't capable of making important decisions by herself, and that anytime she's tasked with doing so, she behaves irrationally and just waits for Nell or someone else to really pick up the pieces and sort it all out for her. Ignoring all of this, later on Sula meets Jude, who she's later caught having an affair with, which prompts Jude to abandon his wife and children.
What was the reason? What was the reason? What was the reason?
Why? I don't know. Like, how are you Gonna leave your wife and kids, who you supposed to provide for in this day and age, who you wanted to be a man so bad for, because you got caught cheating. You had an affair. Now, I don't know if he was leaving with her. I don't know if he was just starting a new family with Sula, but like the fact that he just picked up and left all his responsibilities is deplorable. With Nell not knowing how to handle her grief, she locks herself in the bathroom and laments the fact that she can't stay there and live in those feelings forever. Despite everything she's going through, she's cursed to exist. She's cursed to care for her kids. She's cursed to be forced to navigate through this world without the presence of her man Jude, who she might not have loved, but at least the presence of him being there made life easier. And also with the sisterhood of Sula, who she cherished so greatly. Even though they hadn't talked for 10 years, I think she was very fond of that relationship, and she was very fond of all the memories it brought to her. Last but not least, the theme of this chapter, she's forced to survive.
And then she said to me, what you care about what people think about you? You have to learn one thing in life. You cannot love everybody and appreciate everybody, and it goes both ways. If you don't learn that now, you're gonna always be the fool of somebody. Live your life to the full. Everything you do, and as long as you don't hurt anybody and you're happy doing what you do, let them talk.